And also, this is amazing because you already have this super crispy fried pork cutlet essentially, so you can use any sauce you want.
Mexican was always our go-to in the catering days. Get yourself a pork shoulder, boom, taco night.
So easy.
Serve it with super simple with like a little bit of lime over some rice, and it is phenomenal.
They're tender.
But they're not too chewy. This is the best spare rib I've ever had.
Pork, one of my favorite meats, but I feel like we haven't explored it enough on this channel in the past.
Which is surprising because it's super delicious, it's versatile, you can make so many good recipes with it.
And this video is sponsored by National Pork Board, so we figured we would give you the complete overview to pork. We're gonna head to the butcher, we're gonna learn about all of the cuts, and then we're gonna give you some of our favorite recipes.
And like a mix of some more exotic ones and some more accessible ones as well.
But before we get into the recipes, we're gonna take a little field trip over to the butcher and learn about all the different cuts of pork.
Pigs are a really interesting animal. They are such a durable animal. They take less time to reach slaughter weight than other such meat animals. They have a great collection of flavor and texture.
Why do you think pork isn't as popular today?
Pork isn't quite as popular because it's gotten this bad rep as like a fattier meat, which it really isn't. I mean, you see this here, see these big fat caps on the top of the fat of the pig right here, and that's certainly a lot of fat, but that all gets trimmed off. The meat itself is fairly lean. Sure, the pork shoulder is pretty fatty, but the pork chops themselves, particularly the pork loin, the pork tenderloin, the sirloin, those are all very lean cuts. So your bone-in pork chop is essentially the ribeye of the pig. It's got a delicious shoulder cap on the top and a really great loin right in the center. It's a little bit fattier than the pork loin, which is the second half of that loin section, but it's one of the most flavorful cuts on the pig. You can't have bone-in pork chops and baby back ribs. Because bone-in pork chops are so popular, most butcher shops will only sell pork spare ribs.
Pork chop is definitely one of the more classic cuts of pork. But I feel like, you know, people normally just sear it up, and we wanted to do something a little different. So we're gonna go over to Japan and borrow the tonkatsu recipe.
We're going to Japan?
We're going to Japan for
Nobody
this
told
recipe.
me we're going to Japan.
For the tonkatsu, it's really simple. You're gonna take your pork chop, and what I did was just trim it away from the bone, if it is bone in, and then just give it a pound. You wanna get it nice and thin because we're gonna fry it up and you want it to cook through. Once you've pounded out your pork chop, just give it a little hit of salt to season it, and then you can move on to your breading. After you pound it out and it's super even, then you can take it through your 3-part breading, which is really simple. Just flour first, dip it into the flour, make sure it's completely coated, then go into your egg wash. Just 1 egg beaten up. Get that coated in the egg, and then you have to use panko breadcrumbs. It's very important to have the right breadcrumbs if you want the proper katsu
Super
breading.
crispy, extra multiple times, 1,000 crisp.
So obviously you can fry this up in any type of neutral frying oil, but I had a bunch of extra pork fat from the butcher, so I figured I would render that down to make my own frying pork fat. So what I did was I just chopped up the pieces of fat and I put it on a frying pan on low heat and just slowly rendered that down until basically those fat chunks dissolved into little renderings, and then you can bottle that up and you've got pork fat that will last you a while in your refrigerator.
And keep in mind, the pork fat will solidify. Don't freak out. Just heat it back up in a pan. It will melt and be basically oil.
So take your coated pork chop and just fry it into the oil once it's around 375 degrees, because the pork is going to bring it down in temperature, and fry that on both sides until it is perfectly golden brown. That thing is looking incredible. And just remember, for whole muscle cuts like this pork chop, you can use a meat thermometer and just stick that in the meat after it's rested for around 3 minutes. And as long as it's at least 145 degrees, you're good to go. That is going to be perfectly safe and good pork to eat. And then just let that drain off. You can hit it with just a little bit of salt. Like a lot of Japanese dishes, it's very simple, the actual components to this dish. Usually they just serve it with some cabbage, and then you just slice up your tonkatsu, and we have some katsu sauce. You can actually get the recipe in this video if you want the full recipe, but it's pretty much like a Japanese barbecue sauce, and just pour that over your tonkatsu.
And also, this is amazing because you already have this super crispy fried pork cutlet essentially, so you can use any sauce you want. You can make a sandwich out of it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You can put it on salad. It doesn't matter. The point is that you have this amazing thing and you do your thing.
Wow.
The breading.
Oh my God.
Sauce, too.
See, we're so used to growing up with fried chicken, but fried pork chop, pork loin, that is unbelievable.
What I love about pork in this form is
It's
kind
so
of
tender.
the best of both worlds. It's got like the tenderness of the chicken, but like the meatiness of the beef, and it's just like right in the middle.
Right in the middle. It really is a good middle ground.
So on a pig, you have two different kinds of ribs. You've got your baby back ribs and your pork spare ribs. The baby back ribs come from right beneath the spine on top of the pork loin. That's the same bone that you're gonna get in a bone-in pork chop. The spare ribs are actually a little bit meatier than the baby back ribs. It's what we usually sell out of the case. They also have the inside and the outside skirt left on them. So you have a lot more meat on there. They cook at the same exact rate as the baby back ribs, but a lot of us in the shop personally prefer those because you get more meat, you get a lot of different textures and flavors, and there's no difference in cooking time.
Spare ribs bring back a lot of good memories, you know, Sunday night, Chinese food. My mom's favorite thing was a spare rib. That was pretty much all she would eat.
But they were not good spare ribs. I feel like they were chewy.
Not much meat on them.
Yeah.
Kind of beef jerky-esque. So we wanted to make you guys an amazing spare rib that's homemade. And keep in mind, we're cooking it inside, but you could absolutely grill this up. Like grilling, flame, fire. Spare ribs often smoke, and they're so good. So to start this off, we're gonna make our own homemade 5-spice. You could of course buy it yourself, and 5-spice is just 5 amazing spices, and there's different kinds, different varieties, but it's used in a lot of Chinese cooking.
But of course, if you're making it at home, it's gonna be
You can
so
go
much better. But we went a little.
6-spice, 8-spice, we went 9-spice.
Yeah, so here are the 9 spices that we use that work really well. You can use any combination of these.
Yeah, so what you do is you put your spices in a pan, you kind of toast them up until you start to smell the aromas, and then you grind it up in a spice grinder, put that into a bowl, add to the bowl some brown sugar, soy sauce. So then I mix that all together, and you know what, I decided that I wanted to add some ginger. So once you mix your little marinade together, take a tray with some tin foil on it and put the ribs on there and just spread that marinade all over that. Cover it up, pop it in the oven for about 3 to 4 hours until you don't want them necessarily falling completely off the bone. You want to have a little bit of chew, but they should be super fork tender. And at this point, they're gonna cook so slow, the fat's gonna render, and it's gonna be amazing. But we're not done yet. What I like to do is sort of make a Chinese-inspired barbecue sauce. So I take the drippings that cooked on those ribs, I add in some soy sauce, I add in some rice vinegar, tomato paste, honey, and you could add, of course, whatever you want. You can throw in chilies to make it spicy. And then I actually just mixed that around and cooked that down, brought it to a boil until it got nice and thick. So when the ribs are just about done, at this point you can pull them out of the oven. If you wanted to, you could throw them on the grill and then start basting with that barbecue sauce, whatever works for you. I kind of got weird with it. I sort of seared them a little bit in a cast iron, then I covered them in barbecue sauce, put them back in the oven just to roast, hit them with some sesame seeds at the end, and they were so good. Between the marinade that's already on there with the 5-spice, and then the vinegary, like sweet, soy umami barbecue sauce was amazing. This is actually great because you don't want them just falling off the bone. That's, to me, that's overcooked. The fact that they're holding on to the bone while they're tender.
But they're not too chewy. This is the best spare rib I've ever had. It was good without the sauce, and the sauce
And
just
then
took
just
it.
another level.
Oh my God.
This is your classic pork shoulder, your Boston butt. This one's gonna be bone in. So you see right here, this is the shoulder blade, and you've got the ribs here. This is really one of the most famous cuts off a pig. Perfect if you're smoking, if you're braising, dry roasting, pulled pork, carnitas. A lot of traditional recipes use the pork shoulder. Also has that 70-30 meat to fat ratio, so it's also good for sausage.
When you're roasting it, do you suggest keeping the bone in or bone out?
Really a personal preference. Depending on how you're roasting it, if you are just dry roasting it, I would keep the bone in. It adds a little bit more moisture, a bit more flavor. If you are like covering it in a paste and dry roasting it that way, I might wrap it in something like banana leaves or corn husks.
One of our favorite foods to make is definitely Mexican. We used to cook
Tacos.
so many tacos in our catering days, and if you get a nice big pork shoulder or pork butt like we learned from
Not the
Ansel.
actual butt of the pork.
Exactly. You could feed a ton of people. So we're gonna make some pork carnitas and do a nice roasted pork shoulder. Since we're making tacos, I just wanted to make one quick salsa, and this is by far my favorite salsa to make. It's a roasted salsa verde, and basically you just take your veggies, put them on a roasting pan. I've got some tomatillos, some poblano peppers, an onion, some jalapenos, some garlic. Roast that for about 20 minutes in a 450-degree oven. And then once that comes out and it's nice and charred, you can peel off the skin of the poblano pepper and the jalapeno. And then there's just 3 more ingredients. You throw that in a food processor, add some fresh avocado, which is optional, but I like throwing it in there so you don't even need the guacamole. A little bit of lime and some cilantro, and just pulse that until you have a nice salsa consistency. Now, most people don't know this, but tortillas generally have fat in them, like a traditional tortilla. So we had that pork fat, so I figured I would make some delicious tortillas with the pork fat. To make the tortillas, I added some masa harina, then I added in my pork fat and just blended that up together. Then I actually added some yogurt whey, which I had in the fridge, but you can just use water. I wanted to get rid of the whey. Once that forms a dough, you just let that sit for at least 30 minutes, and then you can start rolling and pressing tortillas.
Rolling's really easy. The one thing you want to make sure of is when you're feeling your dough, if it's too sticky, you want to add some more masa harina. If it's too crackly, add some water. Find a good consistency where it's sticky but not sticking to your hands. Roll those little balls up, press them down with your tortilla press or like a plate, and then just grill them up with no oil. I mean, there's already fat in there, nothing, just straight in the pan, flip them over. Best tortillas you've ever had.
To roast the pork shoulder, I wanted a really nice marinade to cover the entire shoulder. So I took some smoky chipotle peppers, which are just smoked jalapenos, and I rehydrated them in some hot water. Then to a blender, I added some onion, a little bit of garlic, some fresh oregano. I took those chipotles and added some of the liquid as well, a little bit of cumin seeds, some salt, some apple cider vinegar, and then some orange juice, and just blended that up, and that is going to be your liquid rub, pretty much.
You can't rub liquid.
You can't rub liquid. Yeah, you can. Why can't you rub liquid?
How do you rub liquid?
You rub
What's that, a rub?
What do you mean? You rub it. You rub the shoulder like I'm about to do. So then you're gonna take your liquid rub and rub it all over.
This is a new thing. I've never heard of a liquid rub.
Well, what's the definition of rub?
Like, I think of spices, obviously.
Yeah, but the actual word, you're just rubbing things in.
Liquid rubbing, I feel like it'd be more massage.
Okay, massage. We're gonna take our liquid and massage it into the pork shoulder. And if your pork shoulder has a lot of fat like this and some skin on it, you can just slice it down and score it so that marinade can seep into the crevices. I took a tray with some tin foil and just wrapped that up in the tin foil so it would steam. I don't want this to dry out in the oven, and roasted that for probably 7 hours it took. What we did was we took the pork and we added on some fresh sauce, and then I cranked the oven up to about 400 degrees and just let that roast on higher heat for about an hour until all of that fat rendered and the crackling, and it was just super crispy. Now it's time to make some tacos.
So we have the roasted pork carnitas with the pork fat tortillas and the salsa verde.
It's be about $5 in Brooklyn. So,
Did it for one bite.
Yeah, one per bite.
Oh my God. Simplicity.
Good roasted meat. Pork is amazing because it's affordable. Like pork shoulder, we used to throw taco parties all the time, and you can feed like 100 people on like one pork shoulder or two.
This is true.
And it's really affordable.
Great for dinner parties, like Josh said. Mexican was always our go-to in the catering days. Get yourself a pork shoulder, boom, taco night.
So easy.
Pigs, because of their physiology, don't have necks. Their heads and shoulders are connected straight onto each other.
Like a super jacked, like muscular dude.
Right.
So the copa is just a like part of.
The copa is the center of the pork shoulder.
going up into the
They
neck.
just call it a neck. It's not.
Yeah, recipes will call for pork neck. Use it as a shorthand because people will be less familiar with the term copa. Copa is also really classic as a curing item. The copa. If you ever go to like a charcuterie spot, it is also that set like 70-30 meat to fat ratio, so it's perfect for curing. You don't need to add anything to it. You don't need to wrap it in anything. You can just toss it in spices and let it go.
So one of my favorite, but a little more exotic cuts is the copa, which sometimes is referred to as pork neck, although it's, as we just learned, a little bit different. But what's cool about this is it's really tender. You can grill it kind of like a steak, and it takes to marinade so freaking well. Because it takes really well to other marinades, I thought I would go a bit more of the Thai route here. So I wanted to make a bit of a paste. If you have a mortar and pestle, just do this. You can always chop the stuff up. We actually ended up using this sort of like grinder thing, which was just kind of fun. So I put in some red chilies in there, a whole bunch of garlic, coriander seeds, which have been toasted, some cilantro. If you have cilantro root, that's the best, but I had some cilantro stem. And then I mixed that into a bowl with some fish sauce. You can also, of course, add some salt or soy if you have that. And then just put the pork in there. And I noticed that my copa was pretty freaking big, so I sort of cut it in half and then just marinated that. You can let it sit overnight marinated, but at least a couple hours. Once that's done, all you have to do is just fry it up. The grilled smoke is amazing. We just threw it into cast iron, though. It's totally cool. Cook it on both sides. Toss it in the oven at 350 just to kind of like finish it off, get it to that 145 that we're after. And then you let it rest for about 5 minutes, slice it up, serve it with super simple with like a little bit of lime over some rice, and it is freaking nominal. It's one of those cuts like people hear neck and they kind of freak out, but when you taste it, there's nothing odd or anything. It's just like really tasty.
Yeah, it's
juicy
very
pork.
well balanced. That's why it's so good for curing as well, because it has a nice balance of fat and meat.
Which is like a nice, goes really well with pork.
That's a very traditional Thai flavor right there.
Thank you all again for watching this video. As we said, it's sponsored by the National Pork Board, so we hope you enjoyed all the versatility and just learning something new and getting inspired to cook pork in creative, awesome ways.
Yeah, and we were really just scratching the surface. There's so much variety, so many different types of cuts, and let us know your favorite pork recipes down in the comments. We want to know what you're cooking.
Wait, 1, 2,
so we
no.
will talk to you soon, or cook with you soon, or see you soon.
Peace.
Later, guys. Hey friends, thanks for watching the video. If you're looking to learn a little more about pork, if you want some more how-to videos, some recipes, make sure you visit pork.org/cooking. See you soon.